Well, good afternoon again, and welcome to our meeting this evening. It's almost evening, and interestingly, how the room quietens down even before it's the appointed hour. So anyway, we're off to a good start, and I'm going to call on Deputy Mayor Keaveney to give us the land acknowledgement.
We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and treaty territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nation, and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation. We also recognize the Métis whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. We extend our gratitude to all Anishinaabe and Métis peoples and their descendants, past, present, and future, who continue to care for and inhabit these lands and tend these waters.
Thank you. And now I'll just ask everyone to join us in a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I just remind you that you can declare it at any time. Are there any announcements before we go into committee of the whole? Seeing none, we need a mover and a seconder to go into committee of the whole for our meeting on the tax levy. Moved by Councillor Forder, seconded by Councillor Greenfield. All in favor, and we are in committee of the whole, and I'll turn it over to CAO Rob Armstrong.
Yeah. Thank you, Worship. So the purpose of today's meeting, public meeting, is to receive public comment, or for council to receive public comment or any particular questions in relation to the final draft of the budget that council is putting forward, prior to final approval. Just going to the second slide, highlighting the process where we've been and other opportunities that we've had for public consultation. The budget was tabled with council on January the 30th. As our process before council gets into deliberations, we do have the opportunity for a public engagement session, and that occurred on Wednesday, February the 8th at 6:30 p.m. Then there was two budget days that council undertook to go through the budget and make changes to the draft budget that was presented on January 30th. And part of this presentation, I'll be highlighting some of those changes. One full day on Friday, February 24th, and then the other day from 11:30 till 4 on Wednesday, March the 1st. Prior to council considering the final approval of the budget, we do have this statutory public meeting, again, the purpose of today, with potential, hopefully, final approval coming to council next Monday with the budget. Should significant changes be made, wanting to be made, we will have to go back through a public consultation process prior to final approval, so that we'll adjust the dates. But that's the current plan as we plan every year with the budget.
And could I just interrupt briefly to ask if we receive questions this evening, how are they dealt with?
So if they're a comment, that's up to council with your final deliberations. Any comments, we can take them back as staff and respond this week to those questions that that we can respond to.
Okay, thank you.
So just to recap, some of the staffing changes that occurred in the budget through, as council recall, we did some pre-budget reports to get direction from council. In addition, the budget included some other additional staffing. Just to highlight those that are included in the budget, one was the cleaning staff. As council recall, we had to take the cleaning services back in-house where they were contracted out. We're recommending that we hire 1 full-time and 2 to 3 part-time cleaning staff for the 2023 and on. 3 new full-time combined roles. We these are not technically new positions, but they're new full-time positions where we had 3 seasonal operators within the transportation services division. And then we need parks facility staff to do grass cutting and other parks matters throughout the fall, spring, and summer season. So those were transitioned, and those would be budgeted from May 2023 and on. The transition of the part-time production coordinator at Meaford Hall to a full-time role. 2 new full-time positions in the facilities division to deal with maintenance, and those would be budgeted from 2020 April this year on. And those positions being a facility supervisor and a carpenter. A new full-time municipal enforcement officer was put forward to deal with all of our enforcement issues that we're dealing with. And then 2 positions in 2 additional positions in development services, a full-time planner and a full-time building inspector to deal with the activities. And those are have no impact on the tax rate. They're fully funded from the fees that would be collected from both those divisions. Some of the budget assumptions that we have going forward, those costs that come forward based on different elements that sometimes are out of our control. We have the insurance policy premiums up 14%, increased fuel costs. Council gave us direction to proceed with a 2.5% COLA. The Grey Sabo Conservation Authority levy, and then the Owen Sound North Grey Union Public Library contract, which comes forward. So those resulted in an increase in the budget of $360,000. Additionally, our Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund increased by about $80,000 from 1.24 to 1.31 million. Our OCIF funding went up slightly, about 100,000, I think, to 1.145 million. And also included in the budget, we continue to utilize a portion of the waste management reserve to offset expenses in this year, with the understanding that the Blue Box program would be transitioning away from the municipality and ultimately saving us funds. So where are we today with the proposed budget in front of the public and council? Just noting that a 1% change in our budget represents about $165,000. We do have growth projected. It's a known figure to us at $282,000, which reduces the impact to the taxpayer as tax rates get calculated at 1.36%. So the projected tax rate increase on the municipal side is 4.46. Once we add in both the county and the education rate, the impact to the individual taxpayer would be an increase over last year of 3.16%. Some of the budget date changes that came forward in discussions with council, or they came forward because they were known between the tabling of the budget and council deliberations. So the ITFD budget did decrease a bit. So that was brought down. We did have a increase in the gravel contract of 117,000. So those changes were made to the budget following tabling the budget. The event trailer was removed from the tax levy and funded from reserves. The radio boom derrick was removed completely from this budget. The drone program was going to be, the next 4 things were going to be funded from reserves versus funded from the tax levy, and that included the drone, the playground material replacement, the 16-foot landscape trailer, and the downtown I&I remediation program. The facilities assistance position, we actually had recommended 3, council at that time endorsed going ahead with 2, so that was removed from the budget. And then the Canada Day expenses were increased by $2,000. So budget day changes that occurred through deliberations was $337,000, which was a reduction on the tax supported operating budget. Just to show year over year expenditures. And so on the operating side, from 2022 to 2023, we need to raise an additional $565,000 based on the way the budget is currently being presented, which results in a operating tax levy increase of 4.6%. On the capital side, there's an increase of $465,000, which is an increase year over year of 10.98%. So for 2023, we need to raise an additional $1 million, which results in a year over year increase of funds required of 6.24%. There's some confusion of the 6.24 increase versus the 4% applicable. This does not factor in the growth that is available to us, additional assessment. I think that's the best way to explain the difference in figures. This is just from last year to this year. Here's the additional funds that we need to raise. If we had zero growth in the municipality, our total levy of 6.24 increase and our municipal tax increase would be the same, 6.24. But because of the growth, it allows us to reduce it down to the 4% number that we do have. Just to give you an idea of how it affects a average single detached home on a yearly and monthly basis, the 6.24% budget levy increase. So the increased levy, once you factor in the growth and once you've the growth related, would be a municipal increase of $105 annually or 8.75 per month. That's based on our average assessment of $276,000 for a single detached home. We always give council a breakdown of where the dollars are going, the tax dollars. Community services typically ends up being quite a large number, mostly because of the OPP costs, which come under community services, in addition to fire and the cultural services side. Operations is all of our transportation services side, and it comes in at 28%. And then our capital is 22%, with all the other divisions, the percentage they make up on the total tax dollar. On the capital side, you can see the majority of the funds go to bridges and culverts, roadways, with some other elements of combined infrastructures. That's when we have both a transportation and a user pay, water and sewer component to it, and then parks and facilities. Those make up the majority of the capital program. I won't go through these all, but these are the remaining capital projects that are in the budget for 2023. We note some bridge rehabilitations throughout the community and some relating to grant funding that we received in the Connecting Link program. These also include some of the user pay capital programs. We've lumped them all together, as well as fire and GIS, or IT supported capital projects. The funding sources, everything is not funded from the tax levy. So you can see 4.3 million is funded from the levy. Staff had put forward some projects as reserves. This was increased by council, but it's the funding from reserves is 3.36. Some of it is funded from gas tax that has to be directed to roads. Grants and subsidies is $647,000. Those would be the grants that we receive from the province. 200,000 is funded from development charges. So those would be related to growth projects that we're collecting money from every unit that gets developed in the community. the long-term debt of $954,000. So our total capital funding is 9.9 million, and that's how it's all funded. Over the water and wastewater budgets, there was really no changes to these budgets. I would also highlight that the municipality approved our financial plan as required by our licenses to operate our systems. And these budgets are in line with the long-term financial plan approved by the municipality, which was to increase the budget's 8% to deal with the infrastructure shortfalls over funding. So you can see what the base budget increase on water and sewer for the 8% increase. So it's an additional 246,000 on the water and 156,000 on the sewer. A lot of that is increased based on maintenance and also long-term capital replacement for a lot of our systems. We've highlighted under the user pay budget those related to distribution, the treatment, and then the distribution on the Leith water system. And that comes up with the decrease or the increase of 8%. And then on the wastewater, similarly, we have the collection and then the treatment in the urban area. And that's relates to the 8% increase as well. That just the next slide just shows where the capital program is going, whether it's the water side or the wastewater side. And then again, similar to on the tax supported, we identify where the funding sources are coming from, the levies for both water and sewer, the reserve funds, grants and subsidies. A lot of this is would be coming forward from the OCIF funding that we did receive. Development charges, some of the work we are doing, especially at the plant, sewage plant, is related to facilitate growth. So it's a lot of it's funded from development charges as well as long-term debt. And this just identifies that the rates would include an increase of 8% on water and 8% on sewer. And as I've highlighted, it was based on our long-term financial plan. I'll also highlight that in the budgets, we are proposing to undertake a rate study that would look at how we apply the rates. Right now, we have a base rate and then a consumption rate. And then the sewer is based on those. There's different formulas for applying rates to units within the community, and our intention is to do that rate study this year. And there is a budget figure to have a qualified consultant do that rate study. So that concludes the presentation of the final budget that council put forward. I guess it would have been 4 weeks ago, or 3.5 weeks ago, I guess it would have been, to come forward to the public. So I will turn it back over to you, Worship, to I guess receive comments. And
yes, and do we start with public comments?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I believe we only have one person lined up to speak, and that's Bill Cameron. Bill, if you'd like to take the podium there. We've got your microphone on.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the time. Two fairly significant issues with the budget that I'd just like to mention, if you have time for both. One, no surprise to any of you, but I'm probably going to surprise you a little bit where I'm coming from with this. And I was glad of that slideshow showing exactly how many new positions we're adding this year. I've always been concerned with the staff levels here compared to other municipalities. Some of you know my background, some of you don't. I've worked for or around almost every municipality in Grey County and most of them in Bruce at some point. I started asking about numbers a couple of years ago, and I believe now it has got up to the point, maybe the CAO can clarify for me, if all positions were filled currently, we'd be somewhere in the 110 range full-time equivalent, give or take. So I did some asking around with other municipalities of comparable size, comparable services. Chatsworth, as of last year, had 39 full-time equivalent. Georgian Bluffs was 45. Now, I don't deny Meaford has its own special little quirks and specialties. Of course, our staff's going to be bigger. I'm not sure if exactly double is completely justified. So what I'd just like to know is, to be that big, enlighten me. What is so unique about the way this administration operates as compared to other comparable municipalities of the same size that requires us to take twice as many people as they do? Now, the other side to that is not just financial. I think we're all pretty aware this wouldn't have been an issue 2 years ago, but it is now. Employees, where does anybody find them? Because they don't exist. If you set yourself up for a bigger and bigger staff, we get to the point of who's going to fill those spots. But the other problem is we have some very good employees. Pretty much guaranteed that if you can hire anybody in this job market, they're not going to be as good as some of our best. Then you wind up with your best people being disillusioned and they go out the door, and we hire more people that aren't quite as good as they were. And there's some businesses right now, I know they're in that situation, and it's leading to a pretty ugly workplace. So I know there's some of you have maybe not been entirely on board with the size of staff, and some have defended it pretty strongly. So I'm just looking for a reason why we are that much larger.
So I suggest perhaps that we ask staff to report back to Mr. Cameron when he's, if you have any. I mean, I'm ready, and I'm sure other people around the horseshoe are ready to argue, why we need the staff that we have. But does anybody wish to respond to Mr. Cameron here? Mr. Barker.
Oh, and for the record, I only know one municipal employee that I'm aware of. So this is not a witch hunt. I'm not picking 20 people that I would like to be unemployed. It's just from a financial standpoint, you folks know me well enough by now. I pinch pennies till they scream for mercy. It's just the way I am. So when I started in business, it was necessary. Now it's habit. I can't stop it.
So Councillor Bartley, would you like to respond?
Well, yeah, I would like to say something. Bill, I agree with you 100%. We have a ton of staff. Now, for instance, you can't compare it with Chatsworth. Chatsworth is half the size. Chatsworth doesn't have the things we have, like you already mentioned. Memorial Park, we have all kinds of employees at Memorial Park. They're not paid out of the tax dollars. They're paid for funds raised from Memorial Park. We have all kinds of staff at the harbor. They're not paid for out of your tax dollars, kind of, because they're paid for by the dockage fees. It's self-sufficient. The building staff, we've just increased the building staff because things are going nuts here. That's completely paid by building permits, no tax dollars. The planning staff, same thing. Self-sufficient department. We've just hired more because they can't keep up to it. It's paid by planning fees. And at any time I'm saying an ill truth, I hope staff stops me. The water staff, we hired 2 people. We have 2 more employees than Chatsworth has because we hired them instead of paying Aqua. We saved $48,000 by hiring their own people over what we were paying Aqua for the same 2 people. We hired 2 project staff. They're paid for by savings that we're not paying the consultants. So that's just a small list of it. You want to cut staff, you got to cut services. We need a list of what you want to cut. At the same time that we have more staff than the people you told us, Georgian Bluffs is a different animal. Georgian Bluffs has a lot more contract staff that don't hit that list. You know that for a fact. Having said that, our taxes are now, for a single bungalow, cheaper than Chatsworth, and we have 3 times the staff. So let's look at the bottom line, what you're paying in taxes. The MBA report comes out that we're so close to Grey Highlands. And right now with Grey Highlands is going to raise their taxes 6.1% blended. West Grey is going to be 6.4%. Chatsworth is at 5%. Southgate blended at 6.1%. Hanover is blended at 6.94%. We're at 3%. We're going to catch these other municipalities on what you actually pay. So you got to talk about what you pay in taxes. Yes, we have a lot of staff. If you need to cut staff, you have to cut services. Right now, I'm living in a municipality that I enjoy living in, and I personally don't want to close an arena. I personally don't want to close the hall. I personally don't want to shut snow removal down. When it's all said and done, I agree with you. We got a ton of staff. But the staff that we have is what we need to run the municipality as we do.
On the on the Chatsworth issue, they do. You had mentioned they're smaller than us. Their road mileage is actually about 10 or 11% more, higher percentage of gravel, higher maintenance. We have one arena, they have three. There's differences back and forth as far as upkeep and maintenance. It's you know, and like I said, I realize we have more things going on here than the rest of them do. I'm just not convinced that double the staff is really justified. And I just explained for all the reasons, not only financial. How are you going to sustain this in the current job market? We could go from say 110 with, let's roll with the averages here. 75% are pretty good people. We could wind up with 130 and 40% of them are pretty good people because the good people get fed up and left. We don't want that either.
I'm going to thank you very much, Bill. Do other people want to speak to his point? If not, we need to discuss the budget ourselves and invite you to stay and hear the discussion.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Mayor Kantner, and thanks, Bill. I assure you, you're not the only one who has asked some of those questions, similar questions. There's no doubt about it. Back when we became amalgamated, I'm pretty sure our total staff was something like 40 or 41. But that was 23 years ago. A lot of things have changed in 23 years. I guess if you want to put it into percentages, you could argue that about 1% of our population works for the municipality. I don't know how that compares to other municipalities. As Councillor Bartley has said, there's a lot of arguments that are immaterial here. You can't compare our municipality to others. I don't like raising taxes. I don't like paying any more taxes myself, but it's a big corporation. We're talking tens of millions of dollars involved in a budget to run us for a year, and that money has to be raised. And the vast majority of those funds do come from our taxes, our local taxes. So we did take a fair amount of money out of our reserves this year, which I agreed to. I agreed that reserves were there, and they are still healthy in amounts, and we use them. Other municipalities have done that too, and as Steve has mentioned, they're still twice as high as we are for increases. So this path does not get any easier to walk down, and next year we're going to have to think maybe a lot harder about taking money out of reserves, because I'm pretty well sure that costs are going to continue to increase, and there's again to decrease staff numbers, to decrease spending overall. It's going to mean cut services, and I think what we supply in our municipality of Meaford is pretty good service, and it has been, and it will continue. Like everything else, it's going to cost. Thanks, Your Worship.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just want to thank Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield for their very thorough comments, but just continuing on the subject of our staff. And I fully support all of the staff that we have here, and I think our staff are here and stay here because we've created such a desirable workplace, and that comes back to the leadership, both of this council, but in particular of our CAO and our clerk and all our senior directors who create an environment that that makes people want to be here in Meaford, and they want to be here, they want to work here, and they also want to enjoy the lifestyle that our community offers. And I think our wages are reasonable. They're certainly comparatively not as high as they are in some of our neighboring communities, but they are reasonable. And I think it's important that we have our staff in place because, as we talked about earlier today, there's a lot of growth that's upon us and we need to be ready. We need to be proactive and make sure that we have the bodies in place that we need to have to respond to the growth, because we well know what's ahead of us, and we know what's happened through Bill 23 and the added pressures that is put on our planning department. And I just think that I commend staff for being proactive and looking ahead and recognizing what our needs are in 2023 and what potentially they're going to be in the year beyond. So I'm fully in support of the staff that we've agreed to hire through this budget. And again, thank our staff for creating that desirable environment that makes people want to be here, because when we put an RFP out for staff, we don't seem to have too much difficulty filling those positions. So I think that says a lot. Thank you.
Other question, comments? Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So the whole thing about the budget, I think overall, I think that fellow councillors, we've done very well. Not to beat the old drum, but everybody knows we've been doing 1, and 0.5. So right out of the starting blocks, we're at 2.5%. I know when I was running for my campaign, I have little cards that said I was going to try and hold 4%. And I told people then that was going to be really quite difficult to do. And at the same time, we have managed to be at 4.46, and we've got enhancements. I also, on my own personal, when I was running for council, I said that I was more interested in taking money out of reserves. And we've done that, and with fellow councillor Bartley talking about reserve money that we might use at this point and more money coming back in. I think we've been making good rational use of the monies which are available to us. So I think overall, with the enhancements that we've done and adding more staff in the appropriate locations, with growth and with our planning department and bylaw officers and all of the things that we truly do need, I think we're doing some very wise moves, putting the right people and putting the right support as needed in the right departments. So today, I'm happy to say that when we have that blended rate at 3.16, I think it's been quite well of us in Grey County that the municipality of Meaford is sitting where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yorick?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. And yeah, Bill, I hear you. It's interesting because being on that side of the fence as a first-time councillor, it's really interesting because when you're out there, the perception of the comments regarding staff is exactly that. Too many. So you kind of walk into this room and you walk into the meetings and you kind of say, I want to pick that apart and find that. I'm going to have to echo Mr. Bartley's sentiments that we went over this line by line, and when you look at the services that are offered, it still comes back down to the question is, what do you want to take out? Because we did have tours of departments. We did get to see where things are allocated, what staff are there to do what jobs. And as everybody's alluded to, there's much growth coming into this community, and that even requires more staff, particularly from a planning perspective. Many of those are user pay, so that's even covered off. But I totally get where that sentiment exists. But I think once you sit in this room and you look around, yeah, I kind of have to support the staff we have as well because of what I've seen and the amount of work that has to be done, and without removing services. And I would just ask anybody that does that. It's easy to say, let's just cut staff. Where, what do you want to take out and what's the impact? Because that is paramount. And we did look, and like I said, we were sitting around here when we were even discussing whether to bring more people on. It's also what exists and can we, maintain, what do we have to do to maintain that? So I'm in agreement with fellow councillors that I think we went over this budget very, very diligently. And I comfortable with the situation we're in now. So I support it as well.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mayor Kentner. And I just wanted to touch on reserves. It was brought up, Councillor Greenfield brought it up. I didn't want anybody to panic on reserves. Looking at other municipalities, one municipality reduced their levy, and they're still twice as much as us, reduced their levy by spending 4% of the reserves on their future asset management plan, which absolutely turns around and bites them in the rear next year. Another one reduced their asset, they funded their asset management plan through the sale of a corporate asset, which is going to turn around and bite them next year. We have used some reserves, not very many, to fund one-time things, which will not bite us next year. And it turns around, if it happens, and I think this is the way that it's going to happen, is the extra investment income that we haven't spent and the annual surplus goes back into reserves. You'll find out we didn't spend any reserves in this budget, or it's real close. That's my opinion. And if I'm wrong, I would like to be corrected.
And I don't see the treasurer jumping up to, to push back. Are there any other questions or comments? I'd like to just be a little clear. I'm very, I feel very proud of how much capital we're reinvesting in our municipality. And I just want to be clear on the numbers. So if I can ask, I've got this 9.9, really $10 million figure, but does that include the user pay portion of capital, or is that in addition to it?
Your worship, we broke them out in separate. There's one capital sheet that's just the user pay, and then there's the other.
So can you give me the total value of our, investment in capital? It's either 10 million or 13 million, and I'm just not clear which. So the
total capital budget all told, and this includes projects carried forward from last year, includes grant funding, user pay, et cetera, is $17,344,000. The funded in 2023 is $14,437,000. And as I say, that includes grants and user pay and anything else that we've had funded through development charges, for instance.
Okay, so you said 17 million is
the entire capital budget, including projects from last year that still need to be completed.
And 14 million was
14 is new capital money this year.
New capital money. Yeah. Okay, and I think that's really the number I'm looking for. Thanks. Just I want to be clear on that, and I think that that to me is really important, because it shows us that we're investing, and keeping ahead of the game, which I think is going to be very important, and it's the reason why I believe a lot of our neighbors are actually into higher, tax levy increases this year, because they have not been investing at the rate we have been, and I think we're continuing that, and that we're well advised to. And I just want to say we've got a really, really engaged electorate in the municipality of Meaford. People are really serious about the kind of community they want, and they don't want to see it disrupted, and they want to see it grow, but they are certainly concerned about what kind of growth. They want good growth. And I just want to say, you don't see them here except for Mr. Cameron complaining about the budget. So I think that tells me that we are on the right track. And I ask again, are there any more questions or discussion for this meeting? And seeing none, I think I will suggest that we have a motion to move out of committee of the whole. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Euring. All in favor? And I believe we can adjourn. Thank you very much.